This camera is getting old. 2014 was a long time ago on the internet. Earlier, I pushed this FujiFilm X-T1 to its absolute limits to answer the question, does it feel slow and outdated, or has it stood the test of time?
And I only used one battery. One measly battery. So first off, I want to talk about the good things, the things that went well with this one battery shoot. So one thing I noticed, or more so didn't notice, was the handling of this thing. The grip, which I actually replaced. I tore off the old grip, put on this new one. The grip was great. I felt it was ergonomic. It did not get in my way at all. I also found the dials and just overall controls to be very intuitive. You can watch one of my previous videos to see kind of how to get to grips with all these dials. I also found the electronic viewfinder to be very pleasant to use generally. And I mean, there's plenty of resolution. Even though this thing is from 2014, it is over 10 years old. Yeah, I mean, the flip out screen, very handy for when you're shooting cars. Oftentimes with cars, you want to get a little bit lower, like with that Lamborghini I saw. Crazy, by the way, to see a Lamborghini. Fucking crazy. But shooting lower is really helpful, and if you don't have a tilt screen, that can be a pain, especially when you're shooting flyby shots and you need to focus on tracking the movement. Another thing that was really good with this camera was the color science, which is pretty much expected coming from a Fujifilm camera with custom film sims. I was shooting on classic chrome this time, just kind of a default setting for me, and it's nice to see like a solid product before you've even edited. With some cameras, when you're reviewing your photos on the LCD, they kind of look eh, and you have to more imagine what you're going to do in Photoshop to that photo. Whereas with Fujifilm cameras, I generally find that you can see pretty close to the finished product straight out of the camera. The last thing with this camera that I noticed worked pretty well was actually not the camera body itself, but this lens. This is the Fujifilm XF 18 to 55 millimeter. It's considered a kit lens, but it's a really good kit lens. This thing has OIS, optical image stabilization, which is just great for shooting video, especially on a camera like this that does not have in-body image stabilization. This allowed me to do walking shots where I'm not too worried about the shakiness in the video. This also is super helpful when you're shooting at something like 1/30th shutter speed. Things can get pretty blurry, as you see in some of these photos, and just having that stabilization helps you fine-tune the blur that you want in your photo. But now let's talk about the things that didn't go as well, and unfortunately there's a couple. So the first bad thing that I noticed with this camera was that it was randomly switching between like my classic chrome color sim and just this other thing that was called like toy camera mode that was just extremely oversaturated and looked like shit, and it was just flickering between those two. I was not pressing anything. I swear I was not pressing anything. Very confusing. Not sure why it was doing that. Pretty frustrating, but luckily it went away. Just weird quirk. Another thing that was annoying for me on this shoot, considering I was shooting a lot of high bursts of cars flying by, was that the burst speed is only like 8 frames per second, and it doesn't let you see in between each shot taken. So you kind of have to work with this really laggy view of the photos that you're taking, which makes it really hard to track the movement, especially with fast moving cars. Another big negative with this camera is the video mode. It's limited, to say the least. Auto exposure is terrible. There's no exposure compensation as far as I can tell, so it just goes way too bright or kind of a little bit too dark. Generally it overexposes, which is pretty annoying, I would say. So setting exposure to manual helps a lot, unless you have to move between a lot of different lighting quickly, which you just kind of have to deal with the auto exposure. And the most annoying thing in video is that there's no autofocus. So it's either set and forget, or put in manual focus and try to track your subjects using the manual focus ring. Unfortunately, a lot of Fuji lenses, maybe all, have focus by wire rather than an actual mechanical focus system. So it's not the greatest way to manually focus, and you're kind of forced to deal with that when you shoot video with this thing. Another thing that I didn't really anticipate was that the lowest ISO on this is ISO 200, which isn't really that low considering my X-T3 I'm shooting this on is 80. So when you're out in broad daylight shooting at 1/30th of a second for some really creamy flybys, you're kind of having to bring a variable ND filter with you, which I have but didn't think to bring because I'm not used to having to bring that. The chimes wanted to chime in, I suppose. Sorry, oh my god. Another bad thing that I noticed about this camera was that the processing time is just not that great. So this is really bad when I'm tracking one car and taking burst shots, and then I release the shutter and have to wait over a second for all those photos to save to the SD card before I can start shooting again, which really tripped me up a couple times when I was trying to track a car and then track another car. So yeah, you just kind of have to work around the speed of the camera. Autofocus speed was meh, fine. I honestly shot in manual focus for a lot of this because I was shooting at f/22 on the lens, so essentially everything was in focus anyway. But yeah, if you're gonna rely on the autofocus, just give it a second. I mean, it's pretty fast, but it's not modern fast. Anyway, with all that said, I took over 500 photos and a handful of videos on one battery. This camera is actually only rated at 350 shots per battery, and 500? I mean, hell yeah, that honestly is great. At that point, after 500 shots, I'm feeling hungry and like I need to leave. 3 batteries, I say, would be enough for an entire day. And I wasn't necessarily being the most conservative with the battery either. I would leave the camera on sometimes. I was reviewing a lot of my shots right after I took them and taking bursts, of course. And I was also using optical image stabilization, which surely takes some electrons to power. This video helped you at least a little bit. Over the next 3 months, you can look forward to a bunch more videos related to this X-T1, and at the end of those 3 months, I'm going to be deciding if I want to sell this thing or keep it in my forever collection. So stay tuned for that. See you.